If you've seen my videos, you might know I'm quite fond of interactive drama games. Until Dawn and Life is Strange belong to some of my personal favorite games of the last few years. But how about the one that started it all? If you were to ask me 7 years ago what my favorite games were, Heavy Rain would be one of the first titles to pop up in my mind. Now that I'm not a teenager anymore, I'm more critical in my judgment, there have been other takes on the interactive drama genre and my opinion on games changed a bit. Did Heavy Rain hold up after a replay session? Let's start with the presentation. Heavy Rain, like in the later interactive drama games, succeeds in making it feel like playing a movie, which you can see in its artistic compositions and cinematography. If a character is in peril, the screen shakes, gets blurry, and it creates a disoriented feeling, making you experience whatever emotion the characters go through. Same goes for the rarer, peaceful moments. Hearing the sad orchestra and piano music adds to the depressing mood that is present throughout a large section of this game. Add a rapid decrease in bright colors and light and what you get is a game dripping with a somber atmosphere. For a game of 2010, these are impressive graphics. The characters look and move in a realistic manner and each place you go to is very detailed looking. Sure, compared to modern games the facial expressions can often look a bit uncomfortably outdated, but for its time this was impressive. Not a single place feels empty or lifeless. It's like you're visiting places that actually exist and you can go to in real life. Not just because of the detailed looking environments, but because of the variation the places have too. They made sure each place you visit has something to make it stand out from the others, both visually and story-wise, to truly make it feel like you've been on a journey. In terms of story, Heavy Rain is a film noir crime story about the search for the one called the Origami Killer. The Origami Killer is a murderer that kidnaps children and drowns them in rainwater. In this story, you take control of 4 different characters, including Ethan, the father of the most recent victim who is challenged to do some messed up tasks in order to save his son. Madison, a journalist who investigates the Origami Killer story and all that is related to it in order to find the killer. Scott, a private investigator who visits the parents of the previous Origami Killer victims in order to look if there are any clues remained untouched that could help find the killer. Jaden, an FBI agent who uses advanced technology to investigate any leads to the Origami Killer's identity. In each chapter you control one of these characters until the end of the chapter, and any actions that you do may or may not have an impact on later events. Regardless of the choices you make, the most reoccurring themes are murder mysteries and parenthood. In most chapters you try to find a new clue, a new piece of info that brings you closer to the location of the missing kid or the killer's identity. Throughout the game you keep encountering all kinds of suspicious characters, never knowing whether they're a false lead or there is more to them than meets the eye. These multiple leads cleverly play with your expectations, giving each playable character enough to work with to wonder what is going to happen with them next. It also never takes too long for the game to return to a character, so if something exciting happens to them, you don't have to wait too long to see how it continues, keeping you on edge at certain parts. Next to these mysteries, there is a strong emphasis on the bond between parents and their children, more specifically, how dark circumstances can affect a parent. How far are parents willing to go in order to save their kid? And how does a good or bad bond affect either parent or kid? There's a scene where a woman hands down tries to commit suicide because she couldn't deal with the grief of her lost kid anymore, even though she still has a baby. But then there are also characters like Kramer, a rich man who has a mentally unstable son that may be a danger to society. Rather than neglecting him, he sees it his duty as a father to protect his son, regardless of his mental state. Seeing these dark, sad themes unravel can lead to both heart-wrenching moments as well as to heartwarming moments, if you were to get a positive outcome, that is. The story starts in slow fashion where very little happens, which raised many split reactions. In the beginning you control Ethan as you're playing through his everyday life, all the positives and negatives included. Especially in the first chapter you're not really doing anything fascinating. You're just waking up, getting dressed, do something random in the house of choice, and play with your children. I can see why this drove some people off, due to the lack of events and slow pacing, but personally I think this is a genius way of starting the game. Not just in the opening, but throughout multiple parts in the game there are these quiet sequences where you're doing an everyday activity. What these activities do is develop the characters by making you experience their daily lives. By making you do these everyday activities or making you wait on certain occasions, it can create a very raw and realistic feeling. It can also give a false sense of security, So when the characters stumble into something intense, it can be just as big of a shock to you as it can be to them. I wanted to play with the children or do something like cooking an egg for Lauren, not because of some prize that was waiting for me, but because I wanted to get to know the characters or make them feel at ease. It's this sense of responsibility for the happiness of the characters that can create an immersion unlike any piece of entertainment I have ever experienced. Unfortunately, the story suffers from more flaws than I remember. Until Dawn and Life is Strange are games where, even when I already know what they're building up to, still hold up when replaying because of the likable characters and all the different responses you can give in their conversations. In Heavy Rain, if you already know which characters are innocent and which ones are not, there are multiple parts that just don't hold up anymore. You know they're not the culprit, you already know the answers to the mysteries, so finding the clues again doesn't do much anymore, and neither do you have much influence on anything. Or at least, in the first half of the game this is a problem. Let's look at Jaden for an example. The first suspect chase with Jaden is completely pointless. Story-wise it goes nowhere, there's no influence on anything, nor do you learn anything new about the characters. In another suspect encounter you have a nice choice moment, but you need to sit through a pointless investigation to get there. In between these investigations, you have the opportunity to react to his bad colleague Blake, who is probably the most unlikable character in the entire freaking game. However, you can only react in a passive-aggressive way or in a loudly aggressive way, but never in a peaceful or agreeing way, not giving you much freedom. As to the second half, suddenly characters can die, you get more options to choose from and your choices seem to matter a lot more. The scenes from the second half don't just hold up, but I'm very impressed at the wide range of different scenarios that are possible, more so than the recent interactive drama games even. Watching all the different endings is a lot of fun, and thinking of all the specific steps you need to take in order to get to them is overwhelming. Some endings are so rare, it's extremely unlikely to get them in your first try without looking up how to do so. This does make the second half incredibly strong in its influences, and it makes the game stronger as a whole. There are even entire fights or levels you may miss out on, depending on what choices you make and whether you succeed in the QuickTime events. Speaking of QuickTime events, let's talk about the gameplay. As you probably figured out from the footage, you control the characters by making them walk around the environments and you can interact with multiple objects. Often you spend your time gathering clues or trying to get all QuickTime events right. As the FBI agent, you try to collect evidence and analyze the evidence in order to find the next lead. While not particularly complicated, it does require you to use logic in what items you analyze and in what order you analyze them, making it a fun little puzzle part, and missing crucial pieces can make it an impossibility to find the culprit. Aside from that, gameplay-wise, there isn't much to it. What's remarkable about the QuickTime events from Heavy Rain, compared to any other interactive drama game that exists, is that it requires a much wider variation of button combinations, and you can actually select the difficulty. In most games, you only press one button at the right time. Here, you have normal taps, quick taps, do specific movements for the analog stick, hold multiple buttons at the same time, like playing a game of Twister, doing certain movements slowly rather than fast, or moving the entire controller in a certain direction. The type of QuickTime events you need to do depends on the action the character makes, and they usually fit very well, like when the character throws something, you swing the controller, or when a character tries to be more careful, you move the analog stick more careful. One of the positives to this system is that it can make the important parts of the story, where you don't want to make mistakes, more intense due to the challenge and variation in different inputs. As well as it makes sure you're always alert for QuickTime events, never wanting to put the controller down and lose focus. And boy, there were some nerve-wracking parts. However, in Heavy Rain, the QuickTime events are also one of its biggest downsides. Simply said, there are way too many and you use them for rather pointless things half the time. There are a ton of parts where you can't continue unless you do some QuickTime events, but failing them only restarts the QuickTime event. This can create big frustrations if it goes wrong multiple times, almost like streaming a movie with loading issues. It can especially create unintentionally funny moments. To answer the question in the title, is Heavy Rain as good as I remember? Well, it's not quite the 10 out of 10 I remember it to be. There definitely are a couple flaws I didn't notice before, like how it adds QuickTime events to moments that don't need them, has a couple of chapters that don't hold up if you know the answers to the mysteries, and the character choices aren't always the most logical. But beside from that, it's still a really darn impressive game, especially for a first in its genre. Excellent storytelling, dripping with atmosphere. A couple of really intense sequences that ask you to make tough moral choices or survive an epic fight where the slightest mistake can create a big scare for losing. Once I started playing this game, I found myself playing it for hours straight, without even wanting to play other games until I finished this one. I'm very glad this was a well-received game that inspired other creators to make something similar, and who knows what the future will bring. Heavy Rain gets an 8.5 out of 10.